Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. How exciting. Thank you for joining us on our live stream. We are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, and I'm so happy to have everyone here today. Exciting, exciting. We have a great program. I'm Erica McLeod from the Yang for New York campaign team, and today we are talking about voter registration. First of all, volunteering. Thank you all to those who have already volunteered and plan on volunteering is a civic duty that most nonprofits and political groups and candidates all across the country, we all need that in order to move our country forward and fulfill our social civic duties. Voting is no different. Today, that's what we're talking about. And, voting and registering to vote is key to our political discourse. So I'm going to discuss later after we're done with this live stream. At the end here, I will go over our volunteer opportunities. But without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce who our guest is today. She's a phenomenal actress and artist. She's been a director, performed on Broadway, movies, and television. Her list of appearances go from a hilarious role on Ally McBeal to a deadly fighter on Kill Bill to recent dark comedy series such as Why Women Kill. You really should check out her website. It's very cool, lucyliu.net. So she is a diverse personality with so much talent. Lucy, we are thrilled to have you with us here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy. Welcome. You're incredible.
Thank you for having me. So listen, I am a native New Yorker. I was born and raised here, and I called Andrew before he decided to run for mayor, and I was curious about him because I was inspired that he decided to go to Georgia. He ran for president. He helped with the Senate there to rally up voter registration and get people involved. So when Andrew called me up and said, "Hey, what about interviewing me about this, this candidacy?" I said, "That's perfect," because I have a lot of questions myself. So Andrew, my first question to you is, it's a challenging time. Things are dark. Things are difficult, people are struggling. So why do you feel like you're the best candidate, and why run for mayor?
Well, thanks, Lucy. Really appreciate your being here, and been a huge fan of yours for a long time. And I think your New York roots are so important because you're a graduate of public school here in New York. Now you're a parent here in New York City. I'm running for mayor because I see the crisis that we're in, and I think I can help. I think I can speed up our recovery. And to me, I'm a numbers person. So some of the numbers that hit home are the numbers that we're all seeing. The 26,000 New York City friends and neighbors and relatives who've lost their lives. And I've talked to folks who were either working in the hospitals and in some cases like holding their hands as they passed, or loved ones who have been mourning their family members. But the economic devastation that COVID has wrought on our city, 700,000 missing jobs, an unemployment level at twice the national average, subway riderships down 2/3, over 10,000 small businesses are closing, including this Korean family's restaurant in Flushing that I was talking to the other day, where they've been in business for 35 years and now they're shutting down. And they've been trying to hang on, and they just don't see how they can make it work. So just seeing all of the lives that have been lost or disrupted or ruined. And my children are in school here in New York, too. One of them's in public school, and he's never seen the inside of his public school because the school has not been open in his experience. And I think that I can help get us out of this hole faster than the other candidates. I think that we're going to need to do multiple things at once. So there are the things that are directly in the city's control, and I can talk about my plans where COVID are concerned, or the schools are concerned. But to me, you want someone who can do a few things. One, make the right decisions on the resources we have and how to deploy them. Two, unfortunately, prioritize, because we're going to have multi-billion-dollar budget constraints even with federal aid. And then 3, activate new resources in the private sector or philanthropy or folks who just want to help get New York City back on its feet that might not work for city government. I just think I can activate more of these resources more quickly and get us back on our feet faster, to the tune of, in my mind, like I tend to think of things in value. I think I can save lives. I think I can save us months of recovery time. And if you think you have the chance to do that, then you have to take on that mission, in my mind. I was attracted to running for president because I thought I could advance our understanding of what was happening in our country that I thought got Trump elected, and I thought I could accelerate the end of poverty. I went to Georgia because I thought I could help flip the Senate, and thank goodness that effort was successful, because now we have a real chance at getting aid to New York. And now I'm running for mayor because I think I can help get our city back on its feet.
It's a very scary time for people. I feel like people feel unprotected. I think now with the new administration, there's a feeling of more security. And you have a lot of different policies that you have laid out. And I'm just curious about how you feel you will be able to support people and get that message out. And where do you think that money is going to come from? And how will you implement that?
Well, like you just said, Lucy, having Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer and the rest of the folks in control of our government is a game changer for New York and New York City. So Joe Biden's plan already has $20 billion for vaccine distribution. So that will be immensely helpful to us. And the last bill I saw that was proposed by the Democrats had hundreds of billions of dollars in aid to cities and states. And order of magnitude was, I think, around 15 billion is supposed to come right to New York. So if you get that money coming in, then that means that you actually can deploy the vaccine faster. You can bridge some of these budgetary holes that you have. You can invest in PPE. And I mean, unfortunately, like right now, we're still in a position where you're going to need testing for a while. One of the things that I'm championing is that we need a way so that people can actually verify that they've been vaccinated on their smartphone, or if they don't have a smartphone, then they can just produce their vaccination card, honestly. But the smartphone has the advantage where you can actually verify the vaccination against a database, because when you get vaccinated, it ends up being recorded in a state or national database. So we're going to get some money from the feds, but we shouldn't have any illusions that that's going to erase all of the problems, because the budget gap in New York City looks to be about $5 billion a year, not just this coming year, but moving forward, in part because we've seen business activity dry up to the extent that it has. We're missing 60 million tourists, as one example. And, you can feel that around us. Maybe some people are, they're like, oh, good, it's like, maybe, I know this is a New York thing to be a little bit down on tourists sometimes, but those tourists supported over 300,000 jobs. So if you project forward, you can see that the deficits are going to be with us for a while. So even if we get money from the feds, we're going to have to make some tough choices around how we're using our resources.
And in terms of resources, I know that the Broadway community and artists and actors alike and dancers are really suffering right now. And obviously that was a huge influx of money for tourists as well. And how would you support the artist community and help bring that back?
This is so important. Like, people think about art as a luxury, but in New York City, art is a key economic driver. And again, as the numbers guy, like about 14 million people went to Broadway shows every year when it was open, supported about 87,000 jobs. And those are not just stars like you, those are ushers and security guards and ticket agents and folks who are showing up and just working the door. So we have to project forward and say, when are we going to be able to reopen Broadway? So Broadway essentially gave up until fall of this year. And then the question is, are we going to be able to reopen Broadway in the fall? So that's going to depend upon vaccine adoption and rollout. But it also is going to involve, again, having this passport where you can show up to the theater and say, I've been vaccinated. Because let's say you live in New Jersey, you get vaccinated. Does that mean that you feel safe going to a Broadway show, like come September? Yes, if you know everyone in that theater has also been vaccinated, then you can take your mask off and breathe easy. But if you don't have confidence that everyone in that theater's been vaccinated, maybe you don't feel confident. So if you want to reopen Broadway, you need to have a way that people can very quickly and easily verify that they've been vaccinated. And that has to be the goal.
I'm thinking that even with the vaccine, we still have to wear masks to protect ourselves. I mean, ultimately, it's not a cure. It doesn't make you immune. It just is the solution right now. And of course, there are a lot of people that are not comfortable being vaccinated. So I don't know if that then, sort of segregates people who don't want it and people who do. So it's a big question overall. But
yeah, I'm with you in the sense that, so I'm very pro-vaccine, and particularly if you're looking to speed up the recovery of New York City, like we should be trying to vaccinate everyone. At the same time, I totally agree with you that you shouldn't mandate it. But if you're a private venue, then you can require it to actually make use of your venue. So in other words, if I'm a restaurant, I say, hey, if you want to come to this restaurant, then you have to just show you've been vaccinated. Like that is fine. Because there's no one forcing you to go to that restaurant. But yeah, so that's, and if you're going to have a place-based recovery like you want to have in New York City, then I think that is a reasonable thing to ask.
And I want to talk a little bit about public transportation, which I know that you take and I have taken and continue to take the subway. I was,
Wait, let's stop there for just a sec, Lucy. Like when you take the subway, like do you get recognized? Because you're obviously very famous.
Sometimes I get recognized, but sometimes people just don't care because it's New York, I mean, people will come and they'll talk to you and that's fine. I mean, now I have a mask on and a hat and, a winter coat, but even then, I don't mind talking to people. I mean, that's life. That's what makes people.
No, I was just curious. More than anything. It is true. It's different now than it was.
I don't necessarily like being photographed in the subway when I'm, reading or doing whatever I'm doing with my son. But I think that, I don't mind talking to people. That's cool. I mean, that's what makes the world go round, right?
I love talking to people too. And it's been funny, Lucy, because I've only been a public figure for a couple of years, whereas you've been a public figure for quite some time. And it was really a massive adjustment for me being recognized on the street. And, it started happening, I guess, 2019, like during the debate season, where all of a sudden, if I was just going to get a cup of coffee, so it'd be like, hey, Andrew, and I'd be like, what? Like that was a very good experience.
If you are mayor, you better get used to it, because it is something that is, I think, part of what makes someone special. And I think what makes you different from any other person that I know in politics that I know closely is just that you're very positive and you're very, your energy is up, and that's why I didn't know that you were actually living in New York. I thought you were living on the West Coast.
It's like
when I called you and you said, I actually live in Hell's Kitchen. And I was shocked. I just assumed that you lived in San Francisco or something. I don't know why.
Lucy, you are not the first person to say that or think that. And so I'd love to trace this because I've been kind of curious myself. Certainly there was a period in the media where it was like, California tech entrepreneur Andrew Yang. And I was like, like try to correct people and be like, whatever. But my parents immigrated as students and met at UC Berkeley. My brother was born in San Francisco, but then my dad took a job at GE in Schenectady. And so I was born in upstate New York. But there is some kind of like West Coast energy or DNA because like my parents met out West, my brother was born there. But I grew in upstate New York and then the suburbs of New York. And then I've been here for 25 years with, a lot of traveling and working in other places. But yeah, apparently I've got a really California energy.
Maybe because you also use the word like a lot. People just assume you're from California,
Yeah, I probably have a speech pattern too. I've been known to say dude as well. That maybe that's a West Coast thing.
Dude,
and come on, dude.
That doesn't help.
Yeah.
But that being said, I love that you live in New York, that your son goes to public school, and that you take public transportation. I wanted to ask you about your idea to make things more environmental with public transportation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to. So you grew up in Queens, and so I'm imagining that you were getting around via subway like your entire student life and
bus,
and
the
else.
Q66, and I took the the F, the E, the yellow line. Things have changed quite a bit since then. Like now there's a W, which I didn't have before. But I took the L to Stuyvesant to go to school and to go across. I mean, I've been taking public transportation since the beginning of time for myself. So, and I love it. It's fast, it's efficient, and
it's special. It's wonderful.
Special. It makes New York, New York.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So for me, I moved here when I was 21, and like New York City is unique in that it's maybe one of the only places in the country that you can live and not own a car and be like perfectly happy and comfortable, as I was for 19 years until my second child was born, and then I bit the bullet and bought a car. Like that was a very sad day. So you have like 19 years of just subwaying and biking and walking and generally getting around. And I was a big walker where like I always wanted to be able to either walk or bike to work if I could, like if I had the choice. I mean, sometimes obviously you don't. So that has to be central to New York in my view. And there are so many reasons why. We have to make it so that people do not have to own a car to live and work and bring their kids to school and everything else in New York City. So the subway, I've looked at the numbers, it's a challenge. But one of the things that I know is that you cannot raise subway fares to success. That is completely not a thing. You have to keep subways accessible. If anything, you have to expand this program called Fair Fares. That means that if you don't make a certain amount of money, then you actually pay less than other people. I'm very confident that raising fares is the wrong thing to do. The thing that we have the big opportunity in public transit are bikes and buses. Now, we've done a good job of painting green bike lanes, but some of those bike lanes aren't very well protected. I want to make New York City very, very bikeable. And I think I've spent the last number of years bringing my children to school on my bike. I have one of those commuter bikes with a ugly orange seat on the back that the kids ride. You've probably seen them. It's like, I feel like that's like the uniform, New York parent bike seat, where it's like you get that ugly orange thing. But biking my kids to school was my favorite part of the day. And I feel like we have to make that the norm for more parents if we can. We have to make it so that if you drive into Manhattan, there is a congestion pricing plan that's been in the works for years that I love. Because a lot of the folks that are driving into New York, frankly, are not New Yorkers. Where like if you drive into New York and you have to pay a bit extra that we use to fund the MTA, that's a win. If you're reluctant to pay that and you end up taking New Jersey Transit in or Metro North or something else in, like that's probably a win. So we need to try and make it so that you can live here without needing a car, and we have to make it as bike friendly as possible and make the buses more reliable. And that's something that we actually have more control over than, frankly, the subway, where you can clear a road for a bus lane as well as a bike lane. So I want to have reliable electric buses on main arteries. And then what I want to do is I want to put those arteries, it's essentially like revved up select bus service, but I want to put some of those main arteries on the subway map. Because 5.5 million in good times, 5.5 million people rode the subway every day, and 2.2 million rode buses. So if you have it on the subway map, then people will be more likely to actually see it and utilize it. And then we can kind of bridge the gap for New Yorkers who aren't near a subway station.
And that's going to help the environment as well.
Yeah, I really want electric buses in the worst way. We have a few electric buses, but most of our buses are not. Right. I was even considering, I was trying to get a spec on it. I was like, how much are we spending on buses? And I was considering trying to ping Elon and Tesla, being like, hey, if New York City wanted to buy like a bunch of electric buses, like, would you be able to beat this price? But I think
how amazing would it be if you were able to, to connect with somebody like that and say, we're really hurting. This would help us so much, and how can we work together to make something that is going to make a change, a lifelong change for New York.
Oh,
Essentially.
that wasn't me entirely kidding. Like, I am friendly with Elon. And that's the kind of call I'll love to make as mayor, to rally folks that frankly aren't as like big a deal as Elon, like, like anyone that we think can help get New York City back on its feet. There are a lot of folks in New York that, again, don't work for the government, that can do some things. Like I'm talking to a company that's actually working on that vaccine passport that I was talking about. Like, I'm not someone to be like, oh, here's an idea, and then, like stop there. I mean, now I'm trying to follow through and figure out who the provider is going to be. So it's those kind of calls that I think the next mayor has to be able to make. And I start out with a pre-existing set of relationships that I think is going to make it easier for me to activate resources, both in Washington, in Silicon Valley, in the creative fields, because New York City, it's wonderful in that it's been such a magnet for creative people for so long. And that again is like a key driver of what makes New York, New York. That's one of the main reasons why businesses want to be headquartered here, either because they want the folks who are in those fields, or they want folks who are attracted to this community because there are creative people here, like that, all the pieces fit together. And the value proposition of New York City right now is being questioned. There are a lot of large companies and employers that are looking up and saying, why are we paying a premium for our real estate when there are so many folks who are working remotely? Like, if some of our staff, if some of our staff members are actually migrating out of New York City, like, do we need to be headquartered here because it seems like the talent might be making a different choice? Like, that is core. If we lose that, it's going to be very, very hard to recover. Like, we have to get in there and say, look, you do need to be here in New York, and this is the place where the talent wants to be. And then you have to make that true by reopening the creative fields, by investing in our schools, because a lot of parents like you and me are trying to make a determination where they want to raise their families. So that's one of the, again, like the wonderful and difficult parts of this challenge, is that there are so many components of it, that you can make an argument, though, that if you work on one, you're helping the other.
You feel ready for this challenge because it's heavy duty. I mean, being recognized and having to talk to everyone that comes up to you, that's nothing compared to the actual reality of people suffering, and the poverty and the hunger and the crime. These are real things that are happening and will continue to happen if we don't get help, and we need help. And I've been here through the pandemic. I was dealing with a family member that was ill and had to go to the hospital every day, and my son, and seeing the city start to slowly shut down and to basically become empty. And obviously it's coming back, and it's different. And I think that's my question. Do you feel ready for this job of taking over? Because, going out there and talking to people now and being a part of this is a very different feeling from what you were doing before in your life. Your personal life will be, somewhat obliterated, because you will be, the person who is going to now take care of all of New York City. And, the people in New York are so raw and open and beautiful. There's no hiding, from the people in New York.
I appreciate the magnitude of the challenge. And I agree with you that it's not like oh, am I going to make all the right decisions kind of challenge. It's like a personal and spiritual and a family challenge. It's like it's going to be very, very open and raw, as you're describing. And I think the challenge, if it's too big for someone, it can cause you to like to shrink and retreat and like go into, like your own like shelter or fortress or bubble or whatever it is. One of the joys of even this last number of days has been going out to communities and interacting with folks, seeing firsthand some of the things you're talking about, like the food lines and the poverty in the morning, the concerns about crime. I talked to one person. It was a really inspiring organization. The website's piecesof lifestyle.com. The woman who's leading it is named Erica Ford. But they're like a violence interrupter organization. And one of the workers lost a child to gun violence. And then the stress ended up killing his wife. And so he lost most of his family. And then the person next to him actually had been incarcerated for gun violence for it was like 15 years. I remember looking at him doing the math, being like, you were incarcerated for 15 years, because he still looked fairly young, but they were like working side by side. Because, like the person who had been in jail for gun violence deeply regretted it and it atoned, and is now there trying to help others avoid making the same decision. And there was something, as you said, it was just so human, like a mourning parent. And as a parent, like you and I can only imagine what it'd be like to lose a child in that way. And then to have someone who'd been through really the other end of it. And it wasn't just him. Like there were at least two people there who'd served their debts to society and actually had been, the perpetrators of gun violence. And they were very positive souls, like meeting them, like I liked everyone that I met. But this is exactly the humanity you're talking about. And the challenges are very, very real in communities. Like even now, I've been to a number of NYCHA facilities and communities in the Bronx and Brownsville. And I can't wait to get to more, Lucy, because you understand a bit more every time. There's an element to this that is like you end up embodying the spirit and concerns of the community if you are open to it. And I'm driven by a desire to help our city. And that's really like the beginning and end of my ambition. Really, I'm just here to help. And I feel like a lot of folks do recognize that because there is a lot of love when I go out to these communities. Like wherever I go, people are like, "Hey, Yang," which is actually very heartwarming and invigorating, and it makes you want to do more.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, we both from immigrant backgrounds, the Asian community and the Latin community, which, we want, how do you suppose we can get people to come out and vote? And I talked to you a little bit about how I was never really politically involved ever. We never talked about politics at home, and I only started to become more vocal about it, more recently, because of the former administration and how detrimental I felt their decision making was for children, for immigrants, for human beings, for the environment. I grew up very poor, and I don't believe we had food stamps. I think my parents had too much pride for that. So instead we just ate a lot of boiled rice with boiled cucumbers. I still think that I could have been a little taller if I had the right nutrients. How do you think we can get Asian and Latin and Black voters to come out and to represent, what we'd like New York to be represented and seen as? That's something that I think is very vital. And there's this sort of stigma that our voices don't matter. And I get that because I came from that, and I felt like there were other things that I could do, which was, live by example. But how do we do that now with our voices and change, how we were brought up, essentially?
Well, it's one reason I'm so grateful to you, Lucy, because I think what you just described applies to a lot of folks in the Asian American community in New York City specifically. So first, Asian American poverty in New York City is vastly overlooked. Like the numbers show that Asian Americans may be the poorest community in New York City, with 25% beneath the poverty line. And most people would not guess that at all. And then we do not engage politically at the same levels as other communities. I'm the child of immigrants myself. I do not remember my parents talking American politics ever. There was certainly no message in the household being like, "You're going to run for office someday." Like, like they would not have. They actually were genuinely not pleased with the direction I took.
Yeah, I get it. Being the actor, I get it. It's got to grow.
Oh yeah, you would get it. That's true. I'm sure they weren't pumped about your choice of struggle. Yeah, I'm sure your parents were deeply concerned about your choice to be an actress. So one of my goals in this campaign is to activate the Asian American community of New York City at a much higher level politically. Our community is maybe 14% of the city, but we're not voting at anywhere near that level. Like the number I saw was half that, like 7%, much lower than any other community you can find in New York. And I would love to change that. I feel like I understand that, you understand that, like, we understand maybe why some of them don't see politics or New York City politics as something for them. But if we change that, we can change a lot of things. And one of the things I'd like to change is that right now, the Asian American community in New York City gets a very, very, very small fraction of public resources relative to its population. So if, let's say, Asian Americans are 14% of the city, the last number I saw was that our communities are getting something like 1.5% of public resources, something very, very out of whack with like the level of population. And is that in part a result of the fact that we're not as engaged politically? Probably, so if you can change that level of engagement, then you can change a lot of things. And that goes for, frankly, the Asian American community in particular in New York City, but it goes for really any community. I'm just going to throw out another one: young people. Young people probably not voting at the same levels as we'd like to see. So our politics tends to skew old as a result. For this particular election, the primaries in June. If anyone watching this, like, hey, I don't know if I'm registered to vote, you can go to vote.nyc and see if you're registered to vote. You do need to be registered as a Democrat in order to participate in this primary. It's a closed primary. So if you're registered as something other than a Democrat, you might want to register as a Democrat for the purposes of 2021. And if you are in this community that Lucy and I are talking about, like, reach out and bug some of your family members, friends, neighbors that you don't think are engaged, because we need to get engaged if we're going to change things.
I think it's cultural also. I mean, I was never told to speak out and speak for myself. I mean, running for office or being in the public eye was never something that was brought up or encouraged. It was sort of like, let's just keep our heads down. Let's just, get through the next meal, or there was no discussion about having your voice be heard. And I mean, that's why I think I ended up going into acting and art, because that's where you can actually have a voice. And I think even then it was someone else's voice. It was that character's voice and not my own voice until more recently. And I think that is something that is cultural. So it's a very difficult wall to break down. And I think the more of a voice we have, the more we will be part of this community, because we exist. And it's unfair to think, oh, you don't have racism because your skin is light. And I think that is absolutely wrong. And I know that I have been a victim of racism, and my parents were, and it's unfortunate. And I think, the former administration also kept calling it this, the China virus. And so that has unfortunately brought out a lot of violence against Asian people. There's always someone, there's a caste system that we need to break ourselves in order to really, enlighten others and to bring ourselves up and to carry ourselves in a higher level.
I couldn't agree with you more that it is cultural. And I think a lot of Asian Americans are introverted. I consider myself an introvert. I sense you may be too, because I see your bookshelf. I mean, it seems very, just like, like books and introversion, I think, are, like somewhat correlated. It's one reason I appreciate the people who run for local office from our community, because I think that it's not something that our parents were telling them to do, and the fact that they decide to do it, and in some cases are representing our communities either in the state house or in city council. Like I admire them so much. I agree with you that we need to do more. And I also appreciate folks like you who've been trailblazers in the creative fields, because it's really difficult. Like, you sort of put yourself out there, and you say you're just like, embodying a character, but like, we all know that in order to make it in your field, you have to put yourself out there over and over and over again. And there's a lot of rejection like along the way. And I think our community needs more of that too. It's been something of like an education for me when I see the parallels between entrepreneurship, which I've done a few times, and then running for office, which now I guess I've done twice, including this one. But then also the creative fields, because you're putting out some project that you poured your heart and soul into for a particular period of time. And then you want people to see it and appreciate it, and like it. And it is personal. Like, if you direct something or star in something and then someone trashes it or gives it a bad review, like it hurts. Like, you're putting yourself out there. So it's folks like you too.
But I think that the most important thing, and I recognize this more and more, is like you get a group of people together to create something, and you put your best foot forward, and you have the best of intentions and you want it to succeed. But the point is that experience of what you're doing is the most important thing. And that's what's, the most important thing is that you ran for president and then you continue to work for people. You want to be in the service of others. And I think that is something that President Biden has been doing. And he ran for president many times and did not win, and was always in the service of others. And that is a very big job. And it's not something that's just a career. It's something that is in your soul. And, as he said, and as Lincoln said, you put your whole soul into it. And that's what I do when I'm working and
yeah.
I love it. I wake up, I feel invigorated. Am I tired? Sometimes, yes. But then as soon as I realize what am I doing today, that's exciting. And so I feel that that's what you have, and that's what you put into it. And you have the energy, and the positive mindset. And I think that's something that we need right now, given the circumstances. And I think that I hope that you can help people. You talked about a banking system for everyone. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you explain that?
Oh, I would love that, because it's so key to helping our immigrant communities not get, frankly, exploited. So we're in the world's financial capital, and yet 12% of New Yorkers, or almost 1 million, are unbanked. So what does that mean? It means they don't have a bank account. So they go to check cashers and money lenders, and in some cases pawn shops, and then they get charged fees every time. And the fees add up to, you're not going to believe this, like $3,000 a year. So imagine making, $15,000, $18,000, and seeing $3,000 of it disappear to fees that none of us who have bank accounts would imagine paying. Like if you were paying like your bank account holder, like your bank $3,000 a year, you'd be like, what are you doing? Like, you're hoping they pay you. So the way that we bridge this is we say to every financial institution in New York City, you have to accept ID NYC to open a bank account. And ID NYC is available to all New Yorkers, regardless of their immigration status, documentation, doesn't matter. So if you have ID NYC, then you can walk into a Citibank branch and say, I want a bank account. And then we can get that 12% of unbanked New Yorkers down. And if we do that, then we can save them thousands of dollars per year that then go back to take care of their families, back into their local community, and not to the check cashers and money lenders that, if you look at it, it's like, is there a reason? I mean, for some of them, yeah, they might be adding convenience in terms of a location or whatnot, but a lot of those businesses are exploitative. And you know that in part because of some of the interest rates they're charging, like annualized, some of the pawn shops are charging something in like the 70% plus range. So if you can imagine a poor family paying that. I mean, that's not a business that we should be engendering. Let's put it that way.
And I think that what we want to make sure to then do is to go to these communities, and then you'd have to explain to them in their language, that they're safe. These are not ploys to then take them away or take them away from their children or deport them. I mean, I think there's a great deal of fear right now about that.
Yeah, totally.
And that's why people don't want to fill out the census. And if we don't, then we don't know how we can bring services that we desperately need to those areas and to those neighborhoods.
I hope, Lucy, that as mayor, people will look at me and then feel like a degree of security and trust. Maybe they'll see me and be like, hey, like he's the son of immigrants himself. Like, there's this idea where they're trying to save us money. And IDNYC has been a big success happily already. Like this is something that already has like a base of trust. But even if you have an IDNYC right now, you can't walk into a lot of these financial institutions and open a bank account. So that's what we have to change. But I couldn't agree with you more that a lot of people will just mistrust anything where they're going to have any interaction with anything official because they're living in the shadows. They've been living in fear for a long time. Hopefully, the end of the Trump administration will help. Like, hopefully, being able to turn the page on who's running the city will help. But we're going to have to work at it. I agree with you completely. We'll have to be going to folks in their native language. We'll have to work with people that are already somewhat trusted and credible in those communities.
Andrew, it's been a pleasure. I'm excited that we're here together to try to get people to vote and to feel like they count and their voices can count, and that, speaking up doesn't always mean that you have to go to a protest or, any of that. You can just sign up and vote and count and be a part of change that you want to happen, so that we can all feel like we're successful in our lives, in the lives that we have, in the families and the communities that we are in.
Yes, you don't have to do much other than go to vote.nyc. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure your voice is heard. This primary is on June 22nd, 2021. I know it's a funky year. People are like, there's an election? Didn't it, like was it 2020? But it's this summer, 2021. Tell your friends, let's make sure that we get our voices heard at the ballot box and try and move this city we love in the right direction. And if you're not in New York City, you should also register to vote wherever you are and make your voice heard there too. This is a very difficult time, but it's not going to head in a better direction if we don't get more engaged and get out there and vote.
Yeah. And I think we can teach our kids that, because I know that I'm going to teach my son that his voice is important.
Oh, he'll know because he's your son, Lucy. I mean, like one of the things that's happening, I see my boys and I think about, you must think this even more than I do. You just think like, wow, are they growing up differently than I did?
Yeah. Yes, but I'm still instilling some of the important things. I think, not to be wasteful, to live by example, all of that important stuff. Culture is still there, but it's expanded. The walls are not going to be up there for him, but I want him to contain himself in that culture still. I think it's important.
Oh, me too. I mean, like if you grow up the child of immigrants like you and I did, like there's like a desire to somehow impart to our children like some of what we grew up with. But I have to say, I feel like I'm losing that battle every day. I look at my kids, I'm just like,
don't give up.
Anyway, I won't give up. Lucy.
And
thank you
vote,
for
make your voice count, register to vote, get your friends, your family to register to vote. We matter.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Lucy Liu. Thank you, everyone who's watching this. Make sure and register to vote.
Thank you so much to both of you. What an excellent conversation to be a part of. Thank you so much for being here, Lucy. Thank you, Andrew. I'm just gonna do this final wrap up, give everybody some links and such. So thank you both for being here. So much information was shared. Excellent.
Let's give it up again for the incredible Lucy Liu. I was a fan before, like even now, it's like, I don't know about the rest of you, but like, holy cow, like Lucy Liu, the human being is somehow even more profound than Lucy Liu, the artist, which, I mean, that's a very, very high bar.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great Saturday. Get out there and vote. Thank you, Lucy. You're incredible.
Bye, you too. All right, so I'm just going to close up here. I'm just going to talk about how you get involved. Today we have a voter registration event happening in Queens at the Flushing Library. Starts at 2 p.m. If you want to just help out in that venture, it'd be great. We could always use more help in getting more people registered. We have other events going on this week, which you can check out if you go to our website. This is a different website than our main one. It's kind of our short link website. It's ny.com/take action. If you go there, you're going to see all of the events on Mobilize that you can sign up for coming up for voter engagement and voter registration. So we are just so thankful for all of the time that you spent watching Andrew and Lucy to have a conversation. It's very exciting. I'm sure I am a huge fan of Lucy Liu and obviously a huge fan of Andrew. So anyway, thank you so much for attending this event. And if you want to volunteer, go to yangforny.com/volunteer and we will get you hooked in and plugged in. Tomorrow we have an orientation at 1 p.m. So come on in and sign up and become a part of the team. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for attending.